I've spent my entire life in my brother's shadow. It's not even an exaggeration if you asked my parents about their kids, they'd probably talk about Ryan first, and maybe, if they remembered, mention me as an afterthought. He's 2 years younger than me, but from the way they treat him, you'd think he was some kind of royal heir and I was just the help. Ryan was the golden child from day one. He got all the attention, all the praise, all the support. Me? I learned early on that the best I could hope for was a distracted good job before they moved on to whatever Ryan wanted next. It was little things at first, like how Christmas morning meant a mountain of gifts for him and maybe a couple of practical things for me. Ryan got the latest gaming consoles, designer shoes, expensive trips. I got socks, a new set of work gloves, or if I was really lucky, a tool set because practical gifts are more useful in the long run. It wasn't just about presents, though. It was the way my dad spent hours in the backyard teaching Ryan how to throw a football, but couldn't spare 10 minutes to help me fix my bike. The way my mom would rearrange her entire schedule to make it to his games. But when my science fair project won first place at districts, all she could say was, "That's nice, dear," before going back to helping Ryan with a poster for a class project he'd procrastinated on. At some point, I stopped expecting anything from them. I got my first job washing dishes when I was 14, saved every penny, and learned how to rely on myself. I taught myself to fix things by watching YouTube videos. The old guys at the hardware store took me under their wing, teaching me the stuff my dad never bothered with. Ryan, meanwhile, got everything handed to him. If he wrecked my mom's car, accidents happen. If I came home 5 minutes late from work, 2-week grounding. But the only person who really saw me who actually gave a damn was my Grandpa Joe. My dad's father, a retired Marine and old-school mechanic, was the one person in my life who treated me like I mattered. When my parents were off at Ryan's games, I was in Grandpa's garage, learning how to change oil, replace spark plugs, and eventually rebuild carburetors. He never said much about the way my parents treated me, but he didn't have to. His way of showing he cared was teaching me everything he knew. Then, when I turned 18, everything changed. Grandpa Joe was diagnosed with Parkinson's. It hit hard. The strongest man I knew suddenly couldn't do the things he loved. One weekend, he called me over, said he had something for me. I thought maybe it was some old tools or a book on mechanics. Instead, when I pulled into his driveway, I saw it a 1967 Mustang Fastback. It was a wreck. The paint was peeling, rust had taken over, the seats were torn, and the engine barely sounded like it wanted to live. But to me, it was the most beautiful thing in the world. "It's yours," Grandpa said, pressing the keys into my hand. "I've been saving it for you." I stared at him, speechless. He told me he'd planned to restore it himself, but his hands weren't steady enough anymore. And then, with that knowing look in his eyes, he added, "Figured you deserved something that was just yours." When I pulled into my parents' driveway with it, they didn't get it. My dad barely looked up from his phone. "Don't waste money on that junk," he muttered. My mom just complained about oil stains on the pavement. But Ryan's eyes lit up. "That's gonna be so sick when it's fixed up," he said, running his hand over the hood. "Can't believe Grandpa never showed me this. For once, I had something he wanted. Something he couldn't just take. And for the first time, I wasn't going to roll over and let him have it. For the first time in my life, I had something that was truly mine. That Mustang wasn't just a car, it was proof that someone in my family saw me. It was proof that I mattered. Every free moment I had, I spent working on it. I didn't have the money to send it to a shop, but that didn't matter. I wanted to fix it myself. My room turned into a workshop. Manuals and wiring diagrams covered my desk. My hands were constantly stained with grease. I learned to weld by watching endless YouTube tutorials, picking up tips from the old guys at the hardware store, and practicing on scrap metal. My paycheck from the diner went straight into parts. It wasn't just about getting the car to run, it was about bringing it back to life, making it something I could be proud of. Ryan watched the whole process like a kid staring at an unopened Christmas present. "Man, I can't believe you're actually doing this yourself," he said one afternoon, leaning against the garage door while I was elbow deep in the engine bay. "It's gonna be badass when it's finished." I wiped sweat from my forehead with the back of my hand. "Yeah." He walked around the car, trailing his fingers over the primer-coated body panels. He started, his voice taking on that casual, entitled tone. I was thinking I should take it to prom. Just for one night, I almost dropped the wrench in my hand. What? Yeah, it'd be perfect. I mean, come on, I'd look sick rolling up in this. He grinned, like he expected me to just hand over the keys. You'd let me borrow it, right? No, his smile faltered. Dude, it's just one night. I shook my head, going back to work. Not happening, Ryan scoffed. Why are you being such a dick about this? I didn't even look at him. Because I spent a year rebuilding this thing with my own 2 hands, and I'm not handing it over to someone who's wrecked 3 different vehicles. That hit a nerve. His face twisted in offense. That's not fair, I don't care, I cut him off. End of discussion. He stomped off, muttering something under his breath. I figured that was the end of it. But if there was one thing I should have known by now, it was that Ryan never took no for an answer. That night at dinner, my mom brought it up. Honey, don't you think you're being a little selfish? She asked, pouring herself a glass of wine. Ryan just wants to borrow the car for one night. I set my fork down. It's not happening. Dad sighed, rubbing his temples like I was exhausting him. Come on, son. When I was your age, I shared everything with my brothers. I let out a short laugh. Did you rebuild a classic car from scratch while working 2 jobs and putting yourself through school? Silence. Mom tried a different angle. It's just metal and rubber. Relationships matter more than things. That pissed me off. Funny how you only care about relationships when it's about giving Ryan what he wants. She gave me a wounded look, like I'd just kicked a puppy. Ryan sat there, arms crossed, glaring at me like I'd personally ruined his life. Dad exhaled sharply. Let's just discuss this later. There's nothing to discuss, I said, standing up. It's my car. I'm not giving it to him. I walked out before they could say anything else. Things were tense after that. Ryan sulked. Mom gave me the silent treatment. Dad made passive-aggressive comments about selfishness and being part of a family. I ignored them all. I had bigger things to worry about, like finally getting the Mustang running properly. Then, out of nowhere, I got a call from my aunt in Michigan. Grandpa Joe's health had taken a turn for the worse. The Parkinson's was progressing faster than expected, and doctors had found some concerning heart issues. My stomach dropped. I needed to see him. I told my parents I was heading up to Michigan for a few days. My mom barely looked up from her phone. Give your grandfather our love, she said. Dad grunted something about me missing work. Classic. My best friend, Dean, offered to drive up with me. He'd always admired Grandpa Joe, and I appreciated the company. I debated taking the Mustang, but Michigan roads in early spring were a nightmare of potholes and salt. The last thing I wanted was to damage my freshly restored undercarriage. So we took Dean's truck instead. I spent nearly 2 weeks in Michigan, sleeping on a cot in Grandpa's room at the assisted living facility, helping him eat, listening to his old stories. One night, he asked about the Mustang. I showed him pictures of the finished restoration, and his face lit up. Damn, boy, he said, his voice weaker than I remembered. You did real good. Real good. That meant everything to me. Then he asked, They giving you grief about it? I hesitated. He saw right through me. I nodded. Grandpa Joe sighed. Don't you give in, he said firmly. That car is yours. You built it. You keep it. I promised him I would. After nearly 2 weeks, Grandpa stabilized enough that I felt okay heading home. I caught the Greyhound back to our town, exhausted and emotionally drained. I texted my family my Etta, but of course, no one responded. Whatever. I was used to it. Dean picked me up from the bus station. But the moment we pulled into my driveway, I knew something was wrong. The Mustang was gone. I jumped out of the truck, heart pounding, and ran to the garage. Empty. Checked the street. Nothing. I stormed inside. Mom was in the kitchen. She looked up, startled. Where's my car? I demanded. She hesitated, drying a dish way too slowly. Jason took it to campus. My stomach dropped. He what? He needed a car for school, she said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Since you were gone, you thought. My voice shook. I told you no. That car is mine. Dad walked in. Calm down, son. Where's my car? I repeated, barely holding back the rage boiling inside me. Dad crossed his arms. It's Jason's now. I stared at him. Excuse me? We transferred the title, he said, like it was no big deal. It just made more sense. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. You forged my signature? Mom waved a hand dismissively. Don't be dramatic. We're your parents, we made the right decision. I pulled out my phone and started dialing. Who are you calling? Mom asked, suddenly nervous. The police. Dad lunged for my phone. Don't be stupid! You'll regret this! I yanked it back. No, I said, voice ice cold. Y-O-U-R-E, the ones who are going to regret this. I walked out, dialing Dean. By the time I reached his place, I had one thing on my mind. They stole from me, and I was going to make them pay. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, all I could see was Ryan, sitting behind the wheel of my Mustang, showing it off like some prize he'd won. My hands itched to grab the keys, to drive to his campus and rip him out of the driver's seat. Dean sat next to me on his couch, watching as I scrolled through my phone, searching for any legal way to get my car back. They really forged your signature? He asked, shaking his head. Yeah, I muttered. And they don't even care. They think I'll just let it go. Dean snorted. They don't know you very well, do they? No, they didn't. I wasn't that quiet kid anymore, the one who swallowed every injustice, who let them walk all over me just to keep the peace. This wasn't some stupid argument over Christmas presents or curfews. They stole from me, and I was going to make them pay. First thing in the morning, Dean's dad, Tom, who happened to be a lawyer, sat me down at their kitchen table. I laid everything out. The forged signature, the stolen car, the way my parents had brushed it off like it was no big deal. Tom listened carefully, nodding along. When I was finished, he leaned back in his chair. This is bad, he said. For them, I mean. Forging a signature on a vehicle title? That's fraud. And if they transferred it knowing you didn't agree? That's grand theft auto, I exhaled slowly, the weight of what he was saying sinking in. So, I have a case? Oh, you have more than a case, Tom said with a smirk. You have them by the throat. He helped me put together a plan. First, I went to the DMV and requested records of the title transfer. Sure enough, there was my signature dated while I was in Michigan. I got copies of the original title showing Grandpa Joe legally signed it over to me. Next, I gathered every piece of evidence I had. Old text messages from my parents referring to the Mustang as mine. Bank statements proving I paid for the restoration. Even photos of me working on it, grease up to my elbows, completely covered in sweat and effort they'd never respected. Then came the proof I wasn't even in town when the title was forged. I went to my bank and pulled ATM camera footage showing me withdrawing money in Michigan on the same day my parents were busy committing fraud. The case was airtight. Now, it was time to take action. I filed a police report that afternoon. The officer at the station listened carefully, taking notes as I explained everything. When I handed him my stack of evidence, his eyebrows raised. This is serious, he said, flipping through the paperwork. We'll have to investigate, but based on what I'm seeing, this could lead to felony charges. Good, I said flatly. It took 3 weeks for the wheels of justice to start turning. 3 weeks of silence from my parents, of Ryan posting pictures on social media of him and his friends driving my car around campus, pretending he was some big shot. 3 weeks of waiting for the storm to hit. Then, one afternoon, I got a call from the detective handling my case. We're moving forward, he said. Officers are headed to your brother's dorm now to recover the vehicle. I gripped my phone tightly. What happens after that? We'll be bringing him in for questioning. Given the evidence, he'll likely be charged with receiving stolen property. Your parents, too, since they facilitated the fraud. For the first time since this whole thing started, I felt like I could breathe. It was actually happening. That night, my phone exploded with missed calls and frantic messages. My parents, my brother, even extended family who had somehow heard about the situation. I ignored every single one. Then, just after midnight, my dad showed up at Dean's house. I heard the knock and instinctively knew it was him. Dean gave me a look. You want me to tell him to screw off? I shook my head. No, I'll handle it. When I opened the door, my dad looked exhausted. His suit was wrinkled, his tie loosened like he'd just come from work. But his eyes, the frustration in them, was the same as always. We need to talk, he said. I crossed my arms. About what? He sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. Your brother's in jail, son. He's scared out of his mind. You really want this to ruin his life? I let out a bitter laugh. You mean the way you tried to ruin mine? It's just a car, he snapped. I stepped forward, my jaw tightening. No, Dad. It's not just a car. It's mine. I worked for it. I built it. And you stole it from me because you can't stand the idea of telling Ryan no. His expression hardened. You're blowing this out of proportion. This is family, for God's sake. You're supposed to forgive. I stared at him, feeling years of pent-up resentment bubble to the surface. Funny, you never asked Ryan to forgive me when he took my stuff. You never told him to apologize when he wrecked everything he touched. But the second he faces actual consequences, suddenly family matters? Dad clenched his jaw, but I could see the cracks forming in his confidence. Drop the charges, he said, his voice low. Let's move on. I shook my head. No, he exhaled sharply. You're being selfish. No, I said, stepping back inside. For the first time in my life, I'm not. And then I shut the door in his face. Ryan stayed in county jail overnight before my parents managed to post bail. My mom left me sobbing voicemails, begging me to fix this, to think of Ryan's future. My dad tried threats, then guilt, then finally silence. The next few months were chaos. Ryan was expelled from college the moment his felony charge came down. No appeals. No second chances. My parents? They weren't untouchable either. The court found them guilty of forgery and fraud, sentenced to probation and heavy fines. Dad lost his job, turns out. Accounting firms don't like keeping people who commit financial crimes. They had to sell their house to cover the legal fees, and last I heard, they were renting some rundown apartment across town. As for me, I finally had my car back. It came back with a few scratches, a dented fender, but nothing I couldn't fix. I spent the next few weeks working on it, polishing every inch, making it mine again. Then, I packed up everything I owned and moved to Michigan. I lived with Grandpa Joe for the last 6 months of his life, taking care of him, listening to his stories, making sure he was never alone. When he passed, he left me his house, his tools, his entire legacy. At the funeral, my parents tried to talk to me. I ignored them. They were strangers to me now. Now, every Sunday, I take the Mustang out for a long drive along the coast. Windows down, engine growling, the road stretching out ahead like a promise. For the first time in my life, I'm free. And I'll never let anyone take anything from me again. Life in Michigan was different, quieter. For the first time, I wasn't living in someone else's shadow or bracing for the next betrayal. I had my own space, my own routines, my own peace. Grandpa Joe's house wasn't fancy, but it had everything I needed: an old wooden porch that creaked under my boots, a small but solid garage filled with tools that had seen decades of work, and a silence that felt like freedom. No more whispered conversations behind my back. No more guilt trips disguised as family concern. Just me, the open road, and the Mustang. Every morning, I'd wake up early, brew a pot of coffee, and step outside to feel the crisp Michigan air. The lake wasn't far, and on quiet afternoons, I'd take a drive along the winding roads that ran beside it, the deep growl of my engine cutting through the stillness. I told myself I was done with the past, that what happened with my parents and Ryan was behind me. But the past doesn't just disappear. It lingers, waiting for the right moment to remind you it still exists. It was a Sunday afternoon when my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but something told me to pick up. Hello? A hesitant voice on the other end. Hey, it's me. Ryan, I nearly hung up. My grip tightened around the phone, my jaw clenching at the sound of his voice. What do you want? I asked, my tone flat. He hesitated. I just wanted to talk. A bitter laugh escaped my throat. About what? How you stole my car. How you and Mom and Dad forged my signature and tried to ruin my life. There was a long pause. Then, in a voice quieter than I'd ever heard from him, he said, I screwed up. I leaned against the kitchen counter, staring out at the garage where the Mustang sat, gleaming under the sun. Yeah, I said, you did. Ryan started talking, his voice carrying something I never expected defeat. He told me how life had fallen apart after the trial, how being expelled had wrecked his chances at any decent college, how no one wanted to hire someone with a felony conviction, how our parents, broke and humiliated, could barely afford to pay rent. "They're miserable, man," he admitted. "Dad drinks a lot now. Mom cries all the time. And me." He trailed off. For a second, I felt something close to sympathy. But then I remembered every smirk, every entitled demand, every moment he expected the world to bend for him. "Sounds rough," I said, my voice cold. Ryan sighed. "Look, I know you hate me. And I don't blame you. But his voice cracked. "I don't know what to do. I have nothing." A part of me wanted to tell him that now he knew what it felt like to be on his own, that he was finally getting a taste of what it meant to fight for something instead of having it handed to him. But another part of me, the part that had spent years craving a brother who actually gave a damn, felt something else. Pity. "You expect me to fix this?" I asked. "No," he said quickly. He took a shaky breath. "I just wanted to say I was sorry. I didn't know what to say to that." The words sounded real, but did they mean anything? Could they erase what he'd done? Could they undo years of being treated like I was invisible? I swallowed hard. "Took you long enough." He let out a weak laugh. "Yeah." Silence stretched between us. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, Ryan asked, "Do you think we could ever be brothers again?" I closed my eyes. Thought about the kid who used to steal my things, who got everything he ever wanted without trying, who stood by while our parents ignored me for years. "No," I said finally. I could almost hear his heart breaking through the phone. "Okay," he whispered. Then the line went dead. I sat there for a long time after that call, staring at nothing. Some part of me expected relief, like rejecting Ryan's attempt at reconciliation would bring closure. But all I felt was an emptiness I didn't know what to do with. Dean showed up later that evening, letting himself in like always. He took one look at me and frowned. "What's with the face?" he asked, grabbing a beer from my fridge. I sighed. Ryan called. Dean froze, bottle halfway to his lips. And I told him everything, the apology, the fallout. The final question. When I was done, he exhaled slowly. "Damn." I nodded. Dean leaned against the counter. "So, you gonna forgive him?" I shook my head. "No, not after everything." He studied me for a moment, then took a sip of his beer. "Then why do you look like you just lost something?" I didn't have an answer. Over the next few weeks, I tried to shake the conversation, but it clung to me like the scent of gasoline after working on an engine. It wasn't regret. It wasn't guilt. It was just a feeling I didn't know how to name. So I did what I always did when things got too heavy. I worked on the Mustang. I fixed the dent Ryan put in the fender, buffed out the scratches, changed the oil, adjusted the timing. Every hour spent in the garage was another layer of distance between me and my past. One afternoon, while elbow deep in the engine bay, I found an old note tucked in the glove box. The paper was yellowed with time, the handwriting rough but familiar. "To my real son, I'm proud of you. Keep her running smooth." Grandpa Joe I sat down hard on the driver's seat, the weight of those words pressing against my chest. He knew. He always knew. I ran my fingers over the faded ink, swallowing the lump in my throat. Then I folded the note carefully and slid it back where it belonged. Later that evening, I took the Mustang out for a drive, the wind rushing past, the growl of the engine steady and strong. Ryan was my past. My parents were ghosts. But this was mine. And I wasn't looking back. Months passed and life settled into a rhythm. Mornings were spent at work, afternoons in the garage, and evenings driving the Mustang down quiet roads. Windows down, radio humming. I had everything I needed: peace, purpose, and the satisfaction of knowing I'd built this life with my own two hands. I told myself I was done with my family. That chapter was closed. But the past has a way of creeping back in when you least expect it. I was at work, elbow deep in an old Chevy that needed a full engine rebuild, when my phone buzzed. The number wasn't saved, but I recognized the area code. I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. "Hello?" A woman's voice, hesitant. Is this Ethan?" I wiped my hands on a rag. "Who's asking?" She cleared her throat. "My name's Lisa. I work at a rental agency in your hometown. Your parents are applying for an apartment." I stiffened. "Okay?" There was an awkward pause. Your dad listed you as a reference. I actually laughed. You're kidding. I wish I was, she muttered. Look, I usually wouldn't call, but something about the application felt off. Their credit is wrecked. Their income is inconsistent. And, well, he said you could vouch for their character. I let out a slow breath. Of course he did. My father had spent his whole life bending reality to fit his narrative, and now that things weren't going his way, he was trying to drag me into it. I could already picture him sitting across from some landlord, spinning his usual nonsense about family values and sticking together. Lisa cleared her throat. I take it that's not the case? Not even close, I said. She hesitated. So, should I? I cut her off. Deny the application. They're not your problem, she exhaled in relief. Thanks. I had a feeling, but I didn't want to assume. No problem. She was about to hang up when she added, for what it's worth. I don't think people change unless they have to. And your dad? He doesn't seem like he wants to. She wasn't wrong. I ended the call and stared at the Mustang through the shop's open garage doors, sunlight glinting off the polished hood. He still thought he could use me. He still didn't get it. 2 days later, another call came in, this time from my mother. I let it ring. She called again and again. Finally, she left a voicemail. Ethan, please, she begged, her voice thick with desperation. We have nowhere to go. Your father, he's not handling this well. I know you're angry, but we're still your parents. I deleted it. Then she texted me an address. Please, just talk to us. I didn't owe them anything, but part of me, some stupid, stubborn part, wanted to look them in the eyes one last time, to make sure they understood. So, that evening, I drove back to my hometown for the first time in nearly a year. The address she sent led me to a rundown motel on the edge of town, the kind of place with flickering neon signs and carpet that reeked of mildew. I parked the Mustang and walked to their door, knocking once. It opened immediately. My mother looked older, thinner, her hair was unkempt, her face drawn. My father, sitting on the edge of the bed behind her, barely looked up. He was nursing a drink, his expression one of quiet defeat. I stepped inside, arms crossed. What do you want? Mom wrung her hands. We're struggling, Ethan. The rent is too high everywhere, and your father put himself in this situation, I finished. She flinched. We just need help. A little money to get us back on our feet? Maybe if you know. She blinked, like she couldn't believe I'd said it so easily. My dad scoffed, finally looking up. Of course. Too selfish to help your own parents. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Selfish? You stole from me, lied to me. You forged my signature to take what was mine, and now you expect me to pretend it never happened? Mom's eyes filled with tears. We made a mistake. No, you made a choice, I corrected. Over and over again. Dad shook his head, taking another sip of whatever cheap liquor he'd managed to afford. We gave you everything. I took a slow breath. No, you gave Ryan everything. And now that he's not around to leech off of, you're looking at me. Mom reached for my hand, but I stepped back. You are not my responsibility, I said, my voice steady. You never were. And if you think I'm going to bail you out after everything, you're more delusional than I thought. Dad muttered something under his breath, but I ignored him. I looked at my mother, the woman who had spent years making excuses, justifying every time they pushed me aside. You could have stood up for me, I said softly, but you didn't. Her lips trembled. I didn't know how. I shook my head. No, you just didn't want to. She sobbed, but I felt nothing. Without another word, I turned and walked out. That was the last time I ever saw them. Ryan texted me once, months later, telling me he was trying to get his life together. I wished him luck but didn't respond again. Dean and I started our own auto shop in Michigan, taking on restoration projects from all over. Word spread fast people liked working with guys who actually cared about the craft. I found purpose in rebuilding engines, in giving old machines new life. One evening, as I was locking up the shop, I spotted something on my workbench, an old, grease-stained envelope with my name scrawled across the front. I opened it, my breath catching as I recognized the handwriting. To my real son, it began. It was another letter from Grandpa Joe, one I hadn't seen before. Some people spend their whole lives searching for validation from those who will never give it to them. You don't need their approval, kid. You never did. You build your own worth with your hands, with your heart. And if you ever doubt that, just look at that Mustang. That's you. Strong, resilient, built to last. I swallowed hard, gripping the letter tightly. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson. I walked to the Mustang, running a hand over the hood. I wasn't the forgotten son. I wasn't the extra. I was my own man. And I had a future worth driving toward. The past had finally loosened its grip on me. For years, I had been chasing something: acceptance, fairness, a place where I mattered. But the truth had been staring me in the face all along. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need to fix what was broken between us. I had already built my own life, one that was mine alone. And I wasn't looking back. Dean and I had talked about it for months. But now, standing outside the building we just signed a lease for, it felt real. Our own auto shop. The sign out front was simple: Joe's Garage. A tribute to the man who had believed in me when no one else did. "This is it," Dean said, tossing me a can of soda as we sat on the hood of the Mustang, looking at our new shop. "Yeah," I said, popping it open. "This is it." We had started small, working out of Dean's uncle's garage, taking in whatever jobs we could: oil changes, brake replacements, little fixes that paid the bills. But word spread fast. People trusted guys who actually cared about their work, and soon we had more business than we could handle. Now, with our own space, we could take on the kind of projects we actually loved: full restorations, classic rebuilds, the kind of work that turned rusted-out machines into something worth driving again. Dean nudged me. "You think your grandpa would have liked this?" I smiled. "I think he would have been our first customer." The thought settled something in me. Grandpa Joe had given me the tools to build my future, and now I was finally putting them to use. A few months after opening the shop, I got an email from a lawyer handling my parents' affairs. It was short, to the point. My father had passed away, liver failure. The years of drinking had finally caught up to him. My mother, apparently still living in the same rundown motel, had reached out to settle his affairs. I stared at the email for a long time. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to feel. Anger? Relief? I felt nothing. When the lawyer finally got me on the phone, he explained that there was no will, no assets, nothing left behind except debt and regret. My mother had asked if I wanted to attend the funeral. "No," I said. "I don't." She left one last message. A simple, broken, "I'm sorry." I deleted it. Some things didn't need closure. Some things just needed to be left behind. Over time, I realized something. I didn't lose a family. I just built a new one. Dean had been there through everything, through the fights, the fallout, the aftermath. His parents had taken me in when mine threw me away. When we signed the final paperwork for Joe's Garage, his mom baked a damn cake, like we had just won the lottery. "You boys worked hard for this," she said, cutting me the biggest slice. "Proud of you both." I had never heard those words from my own mother, but hearing them from her, it mattered more than I could ever admit. Then there was Grandpa Joe's old friends, the guys from his mechanic days who still dropped by the shop. They'd sit on the stools by the counter, watching us work, swapping stories about my grandfather, telling me how proud he would have been. I had a family. It just didn't share my last name. One evening, I took the Mustang out for a long drive, just me and the open road. The air was warm, the scent of pine and lake water drifting through the windows. The hum of the engine was steady beneath me, powerful, alive. I had spent so much of my life waiting to be seen, waiting to be valued, waiting for people who were never going to change. But I wasn't waiting anymore. I was living. As I turned onto a stretch of road that overlooked the water, I thought about everything it had taken to get here. The betrayal, the fight, the loss, but also the freedom, the lessons, the undeniable proof that I had built something real, something that no one could take from me. For the first time in my life, I knew exactly where I was going. And the best part? I was driving there on my own. Story 2. Nothing to be thankful for in bed is the title of this tale. I really shocked my wife when she made fun of me at Thanksgiving. For the past 8 years, I, a 34-year-old man, have been working really hard at the district attorney's office. Rising from the bottom, I began as a DA assistant. After graduating from law school, I handled misdemeanors and undesirable cases before gradually moving on to handle significant crimes. To be honest, I was in excellent shape and played collegiate football at state. Up until my senior year, I was being eyed by professional scouts. However, a failed marriage and working life gradually drained me. Prior to Sarah, my 32-year-old wife, my life wasn't very noteworthy. I was raised in a middle-class area by parents who put forth a lot of effort to provide my sister and I with chances they were never able to have. Dad worked for the Postal Service. Mom worked as a nurse. I was the first person in my family to attend college since they strongly promoted education. Sarah was completing her marketing degree when I met her in my second year of law school. She was ambitious, beautiful, and well above my capabilities. That is what I believed at the time. In retrospect, I saw that I was a fucking catch on my way to become a lawyer. A former sportsman? No luggage. However, she managed to persuade me that she was the prize. In any case, Sarah and her family were at Thanksgiving dinner with me, and they always acted as though I were an alien. In Sarah's family, looks are everything. Her father is a physician. Mom has never had a day of employment. Additionally, Mike, her brother, works as an investment banker and enjoys talking about his fucking yacht. Their Thanksgiving is typically this fancy event when everyone talks trash about individuals who aren't present while being flawless. Because Sarah's mother, Linda, believes that salt is excessively peppery, the turkey was quite dry. However, I was doing my best. Mike and I were having a lengthy discussion on the latest modifications to state law. Sarah's voice abruptly pierced the entire fucking room. "Oh, come on," she continued, wearing this patronizing grin that I had learned to despise. "You should feel grateful. At least you're involved in something interesting." The same cannot be said for what takes on in our bedroom. There was fucking silence around the table. The uneasy laughter that erupted around the table was then initiated by her cousin Tom. I noticed that her mother pursed her lips in a disapproving manner, but she remained silent. Suddenly, her father was really eager to chop his turkey. Mike was polite enough to appear ashamed for me. Despite feeling the blood rush to my face, I managed to hold it together. What should I have done? Because she looks horrible in front of her beloved family after a Thanksgiving scenario. I pretended that it didn't break me down on the inside and simply took a large gulp of my beverage. I think it came off as a scowl, but I attempted to fake a smile like, "Hey, good one." Uncomfortably, the talk continued. Patricia, her aunt, began discussing a charity event. The anxiety gradually subsided, but, I wasn't really there anymore. For the next 2 hours, I was merely following the routine nodding, seeming to laugh, and refilling my drink glass far more than I should have. At one point, I saw Mike glance at me sympathetically. Even the jerk he was appeared to believe Sarah had gone too far. I simply nodded slightly, asking him what he could do, and continued to drink. The problem is that this was not an isolated remark. Years of this garbage culminated in this. Sarah had a habit of making fun of me in public. However, this was the most overt and humiliating one to date. She usually made more subtly funny remarks regarding my beauty, my family history, and my professional advancement. But this time, I suppose she chose to go straight to the point. When dessert arrived, I was already mentally exhausted. As I stared at the pumpkin pie, I reflected on how incredibly miserable I was and wondered when I had turned into this shell of a person who simply accepted this type of treatment. And that night, I had a sudden realization. It was more of a silent revelation that I couldn't, not a big table-flipping moment. I would no longer live this way. Around 10 o'clock at night, after everyone had finally left our house, I was in the kitchen doing the dishes while again reliving that embarrassing incident. Sarah demanded that we have granite countertops and stainless steel appliances, since that's what successful people have. So we bought this lovely suburban house 3 years ago. It seemed more like a jail than a house tonight. As if nothing had occurred, Sarah waltzed in while humming a tune from the radio, gathering wine cups that are empty. The one she uses for visitors still had her host's smile on it, but not for me when we're alone ourselves. "So that little joke at dinner," I replied, attempting to maintain my composure while cleaning cranberry sauce off a platter. Did you really need that? As she placed the glasses in the sink, she hardly gave me a look. God forbid, Jake. Be less sensitive. It was only a joke. Isn't it just a fucking joke? For telling her whole family in public that I'm not good in bed. Is the joke about embarrassing me in front of your whole family comedic gold? Very funny. Sarah. I was still trying to preserve my composure, but I could hear the edge in my voice. As if I were some overly sensitive youngster she had to deal with, she rolled her eyes and sighed in frustration. Please, no one even gave a damn. You're behaving as though I've done something horrible. Everyone was giggling. It was inconsequential. To me, that was a huge thing. With a soapy dish still in my hand, I turned to her. If I made fun of your sexual performance in front of my family, how would you feel? That's not the same, she laughed, reaching for a bottle of wine that had some remaining wine. What's distinctive about that? It simply is. She filled another glass for herself. Furthermore, such situation would never even occur, since your family would never have a sophisticated enough supper. While there it was, another jab at my family, whom she always considered inferior since my mom took on additional nursing shifts to support me throughout my college years, while my dad worked for the post office. Despite not having elaborate meals, my parents, who had been married for 35 years and were still holding hands, never made fun of one another in public. It dawned on me then. Since our marriage, this trend has persisted. The slights about my pay, despite the fact that I earned more than enough to sustain our way of life, remarks about how I'd let myself go in comparison to her CrossFit friends, and spouses who constantly implied I wasn't good enough in public. Never in solitude. I'm always the target of jokes. Sarah, you know what? This chat is over. After setting the plate down, I cleaned my hands. You can't comprehend the impact of what you do on other people. And I'm sick of trying to convey to you the fundamentals of human decency. Her eyes slightly expanded. I seldom ever responded to her in this way. Whoa, tonight someone is acting out. For you? Is it that time of the month? At her own joke, she grinned. For a minute, I simply gazed at her, fully perceiving her. Perhaps for the first time? In a long time. She wasn't the stunning, self-assured lady I had admired in law school. She was harsh, superficial, and spiteful. And since I believed it was what a decent spouse did, I had tolerated it for too long. You compromise and weather the storms. You manage to make it work. However, the man in my reflection in the kitchen glass was battered and a shadow of my former self. The man who once dominated a courtroom was now incapable of resisting his own wife. Instead of intimidating opponents across the line of scrimmage, the former linebacker now slumped his shoulders and absorbed emotional hits without any protection. Without saying another word, I left her with the remaining dishes and left the kitchen. It seemed like a starting step, despite the small revolt. I had trouble sleeping that night. Sarah lay next to me, unconscious. Turkey and wine are working. Thinking about how we got here, I continued to gaze at the ceiling. This was not how it began. It was a good first year of marriage. We discussed our ambitions, had wonderful sex, and were both advancing our jobs. However, things gradually altered. Sarah began to associate with a new group of people. Wives of CEOs and physicians who planned charity events they didn't genuinely care about and spent their days at spas. She started to care more about looks than substance, and me after landing a position at a prominent marketing business. All I wanted was to be a competent prosecutor and make a difference. Neither office politics nor moving up the social scale piqued my curiosity. That struck Sarah as lacking ambition. I started commenting that I should dress better, network more, and set greater goals. She would act as though I was settling for mediocrity when I fought back, stating that I was content with my professional track. I couldn't stop thinking about how Sarah had gradually undermined my self-esteem over the years, how she'd rolled her eyes when I discussed my work-related situations, and how she'd say to her friends that she had to train me like a dog, how she used to compare me to her ex-boyfriend Jason, who, based on her inebriated party stories, seemed to be some sort of sex god. As I stood there, she would tell me stories. I simply accepted it, made justifications for her. She consumed too much alcohol. She's only making jokes. She's not sincere. But now that I was laying there in the dark, I was unable to justify myself. The Thanksgiving remark was excessive, given the alcohol she had consumed, I woke up at 5 in the morning, far before Sarah would. She wouldn't be awake until 10 o'clock or later. I didn't try to keep quiet. I just picked up my workout bag, which had been sitting in the closet gathering dust for the past 2 years, and left. Derek, a former teammate from college, owned a boxing facility on the other side of town. In college, we had been close. After my knee injury ruined my prospective pro career, he was my linebacker partner and supported me both on and off the field. He had supported me, but once I got married, we started to drift apart. Because he was unmarried and operated a lowbrow company, Sarah believed he was a negative influence. What she said. 2 years ago, at a mutual friend's wedding, Sarah got intoxicated and ridiculed his date's dress in front of everyone. That was the last time I saw him. The gym was located in the town's industrial area. Real heavy bags dangling from the ceiling. Nothing fancy. A central ring. There are weight racks on the wall. It had the scent of perspiration and resolve. As I walked in, I felt ashamed. I had a six-pack and used to bench 225 for repetitions. I used to be respected when I entered a room. I felt soft, exhausted, and angry now. There were already some regulars from the early hours of the morning. The majority were men who appeared to be undergoing training before working in construction or other physically demanding occupations. A few gave me nods. The newcomer was ignored by others. Derek was in the ring while a teenage boy shouted encouragement and held up focus mitts. He had a nice appearance. Though he still has a tank build, he now has some gray in his beard. When he saw me, he looked twice. Jake, man, holy she! Derek jumped down from the ring and ducked between the ropes as he called out. I thought you died or your wife put you on house arrest. I forced a smile as he pulled me into a bear hug. Something like that. Got time to help. A has been get back in shape. Derek held me at arm's length, looking me up and down with a critical eye. I knew what he saw. I'd put on at least 40 pounds since college, most of it around my middle. My once broad shoulders now slumped forward, but there was no judgment in his eyes. Just concern for you always, brother. He clasped my shoulder. But what brought this on? Sarah finally give you permission to have a life again? That comment hit deeper than he knew. Something like that, I repeated, but there was an edge to my voice that made Derek raise an eyebrow. All right. Then he nodded, understanding without me having to explain. That was always our dynamic. He could read me better than most. Let's get to work. Go change and we'll see what you remember. As I headed to the locker room, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, dress shirt straining at the buttons, dark circles under my eyes, a stranger staring back at me. But somewhere in that stranger's eyes, I detected a glimmer of the old Jake, the one that didn't take shit from anyone, the one who battled for what he believed in. That was the moment I really decided that I was going to change. Not for Sarah, not to salvage my marriage, but for myself. First week of training was sheer agony. My body screamed with every blow I threw. My lungs burnt after just a few minutes of activity. My shoulders felt like they were tearing apart when I tried to do even a quarter of what I used to. I started coming in every morning at 5 a.m., putting in work before driving to the office. Then I'd come back after work for another session. The regulars started to recognize me, offering me nods of admiration for the persistent effort. One elderly man, Frank, who was probably in his 60s but still had a brick-like build, would occasionally offer me advice. Increase the hip twist on that right side. Son, cross, or be on your lookout. Derek provided me with a diet plan. You're eating poorly. You have half the problem there. He told me straight up, you're getting soft with all that processed food and takeout. I started meal planning on Sundays and stopped Sarah from putting processed foods in our cupboard. Chicken.steak, fish.vegetable. Sarah saw, but first remained silent. Just observe my perplexed expression as I packed my lunches rather than consuming the food she had requested. What are you doing? On the third Sunday of meal preparation, as I was preparing my weekly lunches, she finally inquired. Without raising my gaze from the containers I was filling, I murmured, "When did you start cooking?" "Ever since." She lingered at the doorway of the kitchen. "Is this a resolution for the new year or something?" Early December was the time. Not at all. I didn't elaborate, but she waited for me to. This was my new strategy. Very little involvement, no more lengthy justifications. I won't apologize again for doing what I intended to do. No more trying to win her favor. I began to see improvements after 3 weeks of regular workout and eating a healthy diet. My face appeared less swollen. I was wearing somewhat looser clothing. I was more energized. I appeared more attentive and forceful in court, according to comments made by coworkers. Sarah was waiting up one night. She was still wearing her work clothes when I arrived home at approximately 9 o'clock in the evening, and she was seated on the living room couch. On the coffee table is an empty wine glass. "Where have you been?" she inquired. I could hear the edge in her voice, even though she was trying to appear casual. "Out," I remarked as I made my way to the shower steps. "Who is it with?" "Companions," she chuckled. When she believes she has caught you in a falsehood, she lets out her cruel little chuckle. "Which friends?" "Do you have no friends?" she said. But as she noticed my expression, her laughter stopped. At the bottom of the steps, I paused and faced her. "Now I do." I uttered those words and proceeded to the restroom. As I undressed for the gym, I heard her following me upstairs and hovering outside the bathroom door. "Jake, you've been behaving strangely for weeks, making your own food and going to the gym, remaining out late." "What's happening?" I switched on the shower. "Nothing is happening. I'm only making a few adjustments." "What changes? Why?" I gave her a direct look. I think that was the first time I had actually looked her in the eye in months. "Since I'd like to." She blinked. The candor surprised me. Was what I said at Thanksgiving the cause of this? "Is that still bothering you?" Calmly, I responded. "I'm not upset about anything. I'm simply going about my existence." "But I have to take a shower, Sarah. The day has been long." I shut her face and the bathroom door. "One more first." I would normally leave it open. Allow her to arrive and depart as she pleases. While I take a shower, let her carry on the conversation. No longer. For the first time, I was establishing the boundaries I needed. For the first time in months, she attempted to start a sexual encounter later that evening. I said I was exhausted from training and declined. Her expression of shock was almost comical. She had never been rejected before. "Are you serious now?" Supporting herself on an elbow, she posed the question. "Yes, I've been beaten. Good night." As soon as I turned my back on her, I fell asleep. The fatigue from my workout that day is dragging me down. 6 weeks or so into my new schedule, I had gained a significant amount of muscle, lost 25 pounds of fat, and was beginning to resemble my former self. More significantly, I was beginning to feel like the self I had always been: confident, focused, and in control. There were more than just physical changes. I noticed that instead of just following orders, I was speaking up more at work, challenging senior attorneys when I didn't agree with their approach to a case, and offering my own strategies. Since Sarah had always thought them uninteresting or beneath us, I made new connections with former law school pals and college guys that I had drifted away from. Christmas arrived and then left. We made the required family visits, but I remained emotionally detached the entire time. Sarah's mother made some passive-aggressive remarks regarding my new look. "Jake, I hope you're not becoming overly fixated on the gym. Being narcissistic is not appealing." I simply grinned and added, "Thank you, Linda, for your concern," and left to speak with Mike. As opposed to the quiet resentment I used to harbor. One Saturday morning in January, Sarah was in the kitchen brewing coffee when I got home after a session with Derek. She literally took a double take as she turned. "You're Jesus, Jake. You look different." I went to the refrigerator and got a protein smoothie. Yes, she waited for more, but I didn't offer it to her. That was our new dynamic. I would offer her as little information as possible while she would scrounge for it. She was going absolutely bonkers about it. She studied me while leaning on the counter with her coffee mug in hand. "You must be receiving a lot of flack from the men at work for becoming so fit." I gave a shrug. "Not at all. Actually, I've been asked for exercise advice by the majority of them." "Oh." She seems unhappy that my metamorphosis didn't have any unfavorable effects. "Well, tonight we're having wine with some of the gals. Come on over." Interpretation. She wanted her pals to see the new me. She probably made up a narrative about how she pushed me to work out. How she came up with the notion to claim credit for my diligence. As usual, I am unable to accompany Derek and the other men to the Alvarez bout. Her expression dropped. "You didn't mention that to me?" I went upstairs to take a shower, saying, "Didn't know I needed permission." "Jake, It's not about permission. Her voice was irritated as she yelled for me. It has to do with ordinary decency, revealing your plans to your wife. On the stairs, I paused and turned to face her again. You're correct. I am informing you that I will be out tonight out of politeness. Grinning at the stunned expression on her face, I went back upstairs. I wore a Henley that accentuated my shoulders and pants that fit well that evening. Sarah stopped me at the door as I reached for my keys. She had already put on a low-cut shirt and a lot of makeup for her girlfriend's night out. She touched my breast and remarked, "You look nice." She used to have that look in her eyes when she wanted something from me. That glance used to make me want to do all in my power to win her approval. I took a step back. Regards. Avoid waiting up. I saw terror in her eyes for the first time that night. Not as if I would harm her. She was afraid of losing control. She was afraid that the punching bag she had been using for years was suddenly getting up and leaving. Her conduct changed significantly during the following few weeks. She began sending me brief texts throughout the day to inquire about how court was going and whether I would want her to come over for supper. I wanted to check in, began to dress more sexily in the house. She was aware that I enjoyed not wearing a bra underneath her t-shirt while she was out and about in those little shorts. Pretended to be interested and began inquiring about my situations. Began recommending dates, something she hadn't done in a long time. She didn't simply order takeaway one February evening. She really made supper, arranged everything on the table, including the candles. "What's the event?" I inquired. When I got home from work, I untied my tie. No reason. With a smile that fell short of her eyes, she said, "I just felt that having a formal meal together would be pleasant. Both of us have been really busy recently. You have been rather active. Translation. I've been waiting right here for you to become my doormat once more." I took a seat and tasted the fish she had prepared. It was good. When she made the effort to cook, which was infrequent, she was always a good chef. "How was your job?" As she poured me a drink of wine, she inquired, "All right, get ready for the trial of Wilson. You?" The typical agency drama, you know. I could see down her blouse as she leaned forward. "In fact, I received some positive news today. I'm being considered for the role of creative director." I really did mean it when I said, "That's great." In spite of everything, I didn't want her career to fail. Yes, it would entail greater responsibility and income. I would be their youngest CD ever. She swirled her glass of wine. "We ought to rejoice. Consider going somewhere for a weekend, perhaps the Hamptons." As I thought about my answer, I took another mouthful of fish. "Sarah, I don't think so." "Wilson's trial is coming up and I have to concentrate." Her smile wavered. "Well, perhaps after the trial. It's been a long time since we went on a trip together. Let's see." She placed her hand on mine after reaching across the table. "Jake, I am aware that our relationship has changed recently. We seem to be slipping apart, not a shote. Sherlock, you are missed." Her voice was quiet as she went on. "We are missed." Her hand on mine caught my attention. I would have been electrified by that contact once. I felt nothing now. This is only a clinical observation. She had just had her nails done. I had purchased her a pricey perfume on our anniversary, and she was wearing it. The candlelight landed on her wedding band. "Sarah," I said, firmly yet gently removing my hand, "I don't know what you're expecting here, but thank you for the supper." "I have no expectations." "Quickly," she said. "All I want is for us to reunite and return to our previous state." And that was the issue. I didn't want to return to feeling inadequate in my own house, and to being the guy who smiled while taking her shit. I doubt that's feasible. When I finally stated it, her expression briefly stiffened before she regained control. "Why not?" "Due to a single foolish Thanksgiving prank. You're still obsessed with that." The genuine Sarah finally emerged, shattering the facade of the devoted, caring wife she had been pretending to be for weeks. "Sarah, it was more than one joke. Years of minor cuts were endured. You've been demeaning me and making me feel inadequate for years. I put up with that treatment for years because I believed that was the norm in marriage. Making compromises till nothing remains." She recoiled in surprise at my candor. "It's unfair. I've always been on your side." "No, you haven't. You've made fun of me when I didn't comply with your wishes and tolerated me when I did." "That is untrue." She raised her voice. When you decided to be simply another prosecutor, I was there to support you. Rather than setting a greater goal, I've put you in touch with people who could advance your career. I have attempted to inspire you to improve. Encourage me. There was no comedy in my laughter. Do you consider that to be my public humiliation? Joking with your relatives about my sex performance? Equating your ex with me? Motivation is what that is, she murmured. You're twisting things, but her gaze moved away from mine. I was correct, and she knew it. Sarah, no. I'm seeing things clearly for the first time in years. I got to my feet. I appreciate the supper. The gym is where I'm heading. You are, of course, she whispered. You only give a damn about that now? I stopped at the entrance. No, it's not my only concern. My work is important to me. Respect for myself is important to me. Being with individuals that genuinely respect me is important to me. The gym serves just as a reminder of my former self, before you persuaded me that I wasn't sufficient. She was sitting there looking at the candles that were melting between us when I left her. Around 3 months following Thanksgiving, the first prevailed in a crucial lawsuit. Although circumstantial, the evidence was strong. I had been prepared for weeks. I stayed late at work and practiced my arguments with Derek, who was a perfect proxy for a jury. Tell me about it as if I were a normal person, not a lawyer. When the verdict was in, he would say, I'm guilty of everything. It was vindicating. The judge commented on the outstanding quality of the prosecution. The victim's family gave me a hug, and the DA gave me a pat on the back. The DA took the entire team to Sullivan's, a fancy pub close to the courtroom where many attorneys congregate, for drinks. I was relishing the companionship among my coworkers. When Sarah unexpectedly arrived, she slid into the booth beside me and placed her hand on my leg in front of everyone, saying, Surprise! I thought I would join my prosperous spouse in celebrating. My coworkers appeared uneasy. Since Sarah consistently turned down my invites to business functions, claiming they were dull or that she didn't want to spend the entire evening listening to attorneys gossip, they had never met her before. How were you aware of our location? I inquired. Yes, I do have my methods. She let forth an artificial laugh. She had most likely been monitoring my social media check-ins and tracking my phone. Across from me is the Ada. Melissa smiled tightly at Sarah. You're Jake's wife, then? It's good to meet you at last. His work on the Wilson case was outstanding. He did, of course. Squeezing my thigh, Sarah murmured. He always had it in him, I knew that. Sometimes all he needs is a little encouragement. Yes, honey? Her hand was on my leg, but I took it away. Could you just give us a moment? After saying this to my coworkers, I led Sarah away from the table and toward the door. I turned to her once I was on the sidewalk outside. Sarah, what are you doing? What? I am unable to feel proud of my spouse. I retreated as she attempted to wrap her arms around my neck. Stop the nonsense. My work has never previously piqued your interest. Her expression stiffened. What has been bothering you lately? You're never at home. You seldom ever speak to me. You must be exercising for some purpose. She squinted. Are you unfaithful to me? Is that the point of this? I take it that you finally found someone who will fuck you? In fact, I laughed. It's impressive that you said it. Her face became white. What is the intended meaning of that? I simply gazed at her. When her phone rang one night while she was taking a shower, I saw the text message from her buddy Ryan. I wasn't a moron. The new lingerie, the late work meetings. She protected her phone in a protective manner that I had never seen her do. Although I had been suspecting her for months, I hadn't addressed her because, to be honest, I no longer cared enough. Nothing, finally I said. Return home, Sarah. Tonight, my team and I will be celebrating. She growled. I'm your wife. You can't ignore me as other people do. Such as? Similar to how you have disregarded me for years. Similar to how you made fun of me in front of your relatives. For example, you have been treating me like a joke ever since we were married. She took a step back, looking shocked. People were beginning to glance in our direction as they entered and exited the pub. We'll discuss this at home, she muttered. No, we won't. I'm done talking, I said. She took hold of my arm as I turned to get back inside. What does that signify? You finished speaking. I glanced back at her face after glancing down at her hand on my arm. Sarah, that implies I'm finished. The marriage is over. The mind is finished. I've had enough of feeling awful every time I enter our front door. She clenched her fingers. You can't simply be finished. We're wed. We made promises. Vows including loyalty and respect. You have not honored either of them. The mention of faithfulness made her wince, but she soon got over it. Are you simply going to discard 6 years of marriage? Like that? No, not in that manner alone. I've watched you flirt with other guys in front of me, heard you make jokes about me to anybody who will listen, and tried for years to be good enough for you, only to realize it's impossible. Her hand left my arm, and I took it away. Sarah, you destroyed our marriage a long time ago. I'm just acknowledging at last that it's over. Now she was weeping, but I recognized the tears. They weren't dejection. They were annoyance, rage over not receiving what she wanted. Her voice broke as she replied, You can't do this to me. Not right now. Not while I'm applying for the CD job. Can you imagine what it would look like if my spouse were to leave me now? And it wasn't there. I cherish you. Stay put. No, I'll be different. I swear. But what impact will this have on my reputation? Sarah, one don't care how it appears. I don't give a damn about your career, your reputation, or what your friends think. I care that I feel like myself again for the first time in years. And that self is worthy of more than you have been providing. She was standing on the sidewalk with mascara streaming down her cheeks as I stepped back inside the bar. When I came back, my coworkers tried not to notice, but Melissa gave me a slight nod of encouragement. It felt fucking fantastic to put my needs ahead of Sarah's for the first time in my adult life. I had relocated most of my belongings into a new apartment downtown 2 weeks later. It was a simple one-bedroom apartment in an ancient building with large windows and exposed brick. It was mine, though. Sarah didn't choose any high-end furnishings. No accessories that are more expensive than my first vehicle. Just easy, cozy things that I enjoyed. Derek knew a divorce lawyer who specialized in instances where one spouse had substantially more assets than the other, so I chose him rather than someone from my practice. Sarah had family funds that had covered our down purchase and a trust fund that I had never touched. I desired a fresh start, not a single cent more than I was due. Sarah had alternated between tears, anger, and frantic attempts to woo me back while in full panic mode. Nothing was successful. Her life was falling apart, and I had filed for divorce. She made every effort, arriving at my residence without warning. I wouldn't allow her in, sending me sexy pictures at 2 in the morning. With the exception of essential divorce talks, I banned her number, even attempting to get common friends to step in. After hearing my side of the tale, they largely agreed with me. You're doing something wrong, she remarked. The one time I consented to get coffee with her to talk about logistics. Halfway between our homes, we were at a Starbucks, which was a neutral place. Well, my flat and her house now. We can attend therapy. I'm malleable. For that, it is too late, I replied, as I pushed a folder with my suggested asset allocation across the table. I believe this to be fair. Despite the difference in income, I'm not requesting alimony. All I want is my own property and my share of our savings. She didn't pay attention to the folder. Is there another person? Is that the point of this? No, I was honest. I finally respect myself enough to leave someone who doesn't respect me, and that's what this is about. That is untrue. You have my respect. You display it in a humorous manner. I resisted her attempt to seize my hand. Please, Jake. I cherish you. I am aware that everyone makes errors. No marriage is flawless. Sarah, one don't need to be flawless. All I need is some basic civility. And you've consistently demonstrated to me that you're not able to do it. At that moment, she began to cry. Real tears, not the phony ones from before. I had sympathy for her. But then I recalled all the times Mom had made me feel unimportant, unworthy, and little. There was a limit to my pity. Take a look at the suggestion, I said, getting to my feet. If you have any questions, ask your lawyer to get in touch with my. With each step, I felt lighter as I left. Sarah persisted in phoning, messaging, and pleading for assistance, cash, connections, or anything else. I only replied when it had a direct bearing on the divorce procedures, otherwise ignoring the majority of it. In March, she texted, "Please, Jake, I can't make the mortgage payment this month. Get the house sold, I answered. In any case, it's too large for one person. My parents refused to assist me. They claim that after making my bed, I must now lie in it. It seems like wise counsel. How come you're so icy? In light of what we've experienced, before responding, I considered that question. Sarah, I'm not being chilly, I am being fair. You made decisions. Those decisions have repercussions. I have no obligation to resolve the issues you caused. I believed you once loved me. I did, but you prevented me from continuing to love you. She had nothing to say about that. 4 months after Thanksgiving, in April, I last saw her at the divorce procedures. For months, that had totally transformed my life. She had dropped weight, but not in a healthy way, and she looked awful. Her hair was lifeless, her luxury clothing were swapped out for store-bought items, and she had dark bags under her eyes. Later, in the corridor of the courthouse, she made an attempt to approach me. Please, Jake, there's nothing left for me. I lost my friends and my job. I might lose the house. I need assistance. I stared at her for a while, as if you had come to my aid when I needed it. For chuckles, you made me stronger rather than weaker. I realize my mistake. I apologize. Do you want me to say anything else? Nothing, I said plainly. I want you to be silent. I have nothing at all to ask of you. That's all then. You're just done with me after 6 years of marriage. Indeed, I was no longer angry or hurt. Just a serene assurance that I was acting appropriately. Sarah, goodbye. Derek was waiting beside my car as I left. He would have come to get moral support, had supported me over the entire procedure. He looked at Sarah, who was still standing on the steps of the courtroom, and said, "All good, brother?" "Yes," I said, feeling the burden finally go away entirely. "Everything is fine." We made our way to the gym. A fresh trainee was waiting for me. A man going through a difficult divorce sought to rediscover who he was. Sometimes it's funny how life turns out. It took me 3 months to get a divorce. Without any further turmoil, Sarah had signed the paperwork, finally accepting the inevitable. I'd heard she had to move into a tiny apartment and sell the house, had to work for a company that was far less prominent. Basically, I had to start over. She still sends the occasional text, usually while intoxicated, sometimes pleading, sometimes furious. I don't reply because I don't have to. My life is progressing. In addition to being a fucking smoke show, I got promoted to senior prosecutor and am currently seeing a veterinarian called Megan, who genuinely respects me. I participated in my first boxing battle in a decade last month, but that isn't the big draw. Went the distance with a man half my age, which felt like a victory even though I didn't win. Enough. Mike, Sarah's brother, and I met up at a downtown pub last week. I thought it would be embarrassing, but he took me by surprise. He clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey man, you look nice." "Thank you," I responded warily. "How are you?" "Excellent." He paused. "Look, I want you to know that Thanksgiving crap, even though I know it went horribly between you and my sister. It wasn't cool. I ought to have spoken out." I gave a shrug. "It's all over now." Nevertheless, he ordered a beer for the two of us, but I declined and requested an alcohol-free beverage instead. In my opinion, Sarah, you made the correct decision. That's how she's always been. She would disparage others to boost her own ego, even when we were children. Is she doing all right? I inquired. More out of courtesy than genuine care. She's making it through. She had to accept a position with a lesser agency and swallow her pride. Residing in a suburban apartment complex, she is still being ignored by her parents. He sipped his beverage. In all honesty, though, it could be beneficial to her. She has never before had to deal with the repercussions. After a little more conversation, we departed politely. Somehow, it was a sense of closure. I've heard from several guys at the gym that I should feel sorry for Sarah. She was struck too hard by that karma. However, I don't. In this life, you get what you sow. She tore me down for years, and her entire well-planned universe collapsed when I eventually got up and left. That isn't my fault. Yes, I'm now getting the respect I should have had from people years ago, but more significantly, I'm getting it from myself. Therefore, be aware that you have the option to leave a relationship if the other person treats you like a punchline, makes you feel inferior, or gradually undermines your sense of value. It won't be simple. It won't occur right away. However, a life where you respect yourself and no joke, no matter how many others laugh at it, is worth abandoning, is on the other side of that difficult choice.